Well, welcome to the Black Doctors Talk podcast. I am your host, Dr. Christopher Holmes, for this episode and a member of the Black Doctoral Network. Today, people, get ready, buckle up, hold your hats down and your wigs. We've got some things we're going to talk about today with none other than Dr. Lerone Wilder, who is a professor, writer, speaker, and pastor. So you know we're going to get some Jesus in this conversation today. I'm excited about having the talk with this great man. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Wilder.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
Listen, this is going to be a great talk, so I don't want to waste any time. Let's jump right in. Where does your story begin? Where does it all begin for you?
Well, I grew up in South Carolina. I've been in South Carolina my whole life. I was born in the state capital and was raised in a town called Barnwell. That's where James Brown was born and raised. And so definitely stories of him are around the Central Savannah River area, better known as the CSRA. So I grew up there, went to elementary school there. Both my parents, my dad was a pastor at two churches there. My mom worked in the school system, especially in food services. While my brother and I matriculated through elementary school. We ended up moving to Spartanburg, South Carolina, because our parents thought that we needed greater educational opportunities. And so from sixth grade to high school, we matriculated there. And that's where then we made the decision to attend the University of South Carolina in Columbia. My major was political science with a minor in Spanish. I was at the time, and when I was in high school, it was the year 2000, and I wasn't old enough to vote, but I was distraught as to what happened with the election between George W. Bush and Al Gore. And I decided that I did not want to pursue political science. I decided I wanted to pursue computer engineering. It was more about the money than was the passion. But something told me that I need to return to my original major, political science. Because I guess as I reflect on it, maybe there was still something there for me to explore. Mm-hmm. And so I changed it to political science, stayed with it throughout my whole career as an undergrad. I had a chance to study abroad with my Spanish, and I still use it today, not as much, but I'm getting a chance to use it a bit more. So it was my senior year in college where I thought I knew what I want to do with political science. I knew I wanted to go to law school. I wanted to work my way up and eventually become a Supreme Court justice. That was my career trajectory. But I experienced something else. Doors had started closing on law school. I was even thinking about pursuing graduate study in political science. That option closed for me. And it was on the week of February the 24th, 2005, when I experienced every day prior to that day anxiety and anticipation that I was receiving a call to preach the gospel. And I was excited on the one hand, but scared on the other, because I saw what my dad went through in ministry, and I didn't want to do what he did or experience what he experienced. But when I talked to a mentor of mine and wanted to see him, I shared with him what I experienced. I saw that God confirmed through him that God had called me for something greater. And I tell people when I share my call story, I experienced cloud 10. I know when we say we're happy or very joyful, we say we're on cloud 9. I was on cloud 10 because I never experienced a type of joy and peace in my life. And when I accepted that call, I was able to sleep well that night. And so then in response to my call, I ended up applying to seminary, and I matriculated to the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta and graduated from there in 2010. And then took a break for a while. I worked in education for Brown Mackey College in Greenville, South Carolina. It was newly opened. And that was then I was exploring, well, what did God want me to do with this call? Mm-hmm. So I didn't know what that looked like yet. I didn't know if it was pastoring a church. I didn't know if teaching was part of that. I didn't know what it looked like. And when I pursued ordination process in a Methodist church, it became slow, and I experienced a delay. And so I was told that I need to pay attention to see what God was telling me at that moment. And so I made up in my mind that, okay, God, wherever you would send me, I will go. And so I finished seminary, moved back to South Carolina, taught for a while, ended up pastoring a church, was ordained, served in a Baptist church for almost 2 years, got married. When I got married, I had started a PhD program at Union Student University where I concentrated in ethical and creative leadership. And at first, I wasn't sure about the MLK specialization. Mm-hmm. I wasn't sure what to do with it. I saw how meaningful it would be, but it wasn't until the facilitator of it had asked me, Lerone, I've been missing you at some of our meetings. I want to find out if you're interested in the program. I said, I do have an interest. I'll check it out, but I'm not sure how to connect with my dissertation interests. And so I talked to one of the speakers there, and it was from his conversation that I decided that I would pursue an MLK specialization along with ethical and creative leadership. Not only because there was a connection between the concentration and the specialization, but also I was able to then determine what I would do to contribute to the body of work that still is necessary to build. And I decided that for my capstone project in the MLK program, I conducted a mock interview with Dr. King. What he would say about the role, what would he say about the role that seminary education played in his social activism, which ended up becoming my dissertation topic, an investigation of the influence of seminary education on social activism by Black Baptist pastors, particularly in Greenville, South Carolina. Wow. And so it was that time where I wrestled throughout my doctoral journey to then determine what would be my dissertation focus and what would come forth out of that body of work. Wow. So I've been in education for 10 years. I'm currently serving in my first tenure track position at Newberry College. I've been in ministry for 16 years. I'm currently serving at a church in downtown Greenville, South Carolina, historic Black Presbyterian church, Mattoon Presbyterian Church. I'm 143 years old, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to learn how to do both, serve in the church and the academy at the same time while managing a family.
Wow. Listen, I don't even know where to start. So let me just start where I think I want to start, right? So just talking about your parents. Your dad was a pastor.
Yeah.
Your mom worked in nutritional services for school, serving.
Yes.
Your background is in service.
I love that. Yes, you're right.
You wanted it to do political science.
I did.
And so I feel like there was a connection between what you wanted to do and what you were committed to do in your life. He never led you away from either one of those, because in a sense, you still are connected to the political science world, just in social activism, and still serving, not just in academia, but also in your local church.
Yes.
You're still doing it. You're still doing it. Now, let's go back a little bit further, because you reeling me in here. So you said there was a point where every door seemed to be closing.
Yeah.
And you felt like you were receiving a call. So my first question is, did you hear that call before that actual date? Did you know there was something inside of you that was maybe leading you to ministry, but you were avoiding it because you had other aspirations?
I'll probably say there were other people who saw the call before I did.
Okay.
My parents definitely saw it. Of course, their thinking was, we know he's called, but we need him to experience that for himself.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they did that. But other people who saw that didn't take that same advice. They said, you gonna pastor, you gonna preach, and blah, blah, blah. I didn't want to hear that from anybody else. I know people had good intentions, but I wasn't hearing that, no. So people saw it. Like I said, my parents knew it. They just knew it was a matter of time. I remember my dad saying to me when I came back from studying abroad and I delivered a message, he knew at that time, okay, God is doing something. It's going to be time real soon. He'll find out. You
said something else too, and I want you to kind of speak on this a little bit. When you talked about the election between Gore and Bush. And you said you didn't like the outcome, and so it kind of deterred you from wanting to go into political science.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about, just to the viewers and listeners, about when there's something that you really feel like you want to do in your life, and then something happens that makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about why that discomfort sometimes is not a deterrent. It should probably push you more into that area because there's a call on you, or there's a need for you to fill that space, because other people probably felt the same way you felt, but it was probably you, or it is likely you are the one to help transition people into a better space. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So as I shared, I wasn't old enough to vote in that election. I turned 18 in 2001. So I was 17 when the election happened in 2000. When I learned about the results of that election, not just who won, but how far it took for the outcome to be determined. You know, it ended up going to the US Supreme Court, and I knew, and it was at that time I took AP Government and Politics. So of course I was interested in the material, and I followed the election closely. And I knew that our class was divided along political lines quite a bit. So I knew that whenever I would go to the classroom the next day after the election, I knew I would hear from the supporters of one candidate and another. So what it did for me at that moment, I felt powerless because one, I didn't have the opportunity to express my frustration or express my view by voting. So because I didn't vote, I wasn't old enough to vote, but was passionate enough in wanting to vote and not being old enough and experiencing frustration, I did not know what to do with that. So the only thing I could do with it was change my major and not have anything to do with politics whatsoever. I had followed politics since my dad brought home a ruler from work and George H.W. Bush was president. So it was there where I had my interest in politics at the time. But then it was at that moment, to me, the unfairness of what happened in that election caused me to say, you know what, I don't know what else to do anymore. I'm just going to change my major. I'm just going to follow the money, do something that's going to take care of me materially, but I'll delay my passion for another time. I'm sure it would come shortly. But then though, a few months later, when I received my acceptance letter and saw that I pursued and that my major was computer engineering and all that the requirements called of me to fulfill, I said, maybe I need to think about this a little bit more. And it was probably not too long after that I decided, okay, I'm being led to change my major back to political science. And it was no drama when I changed my major. It was the best decision I made because I think the lesson was the very thing that became what was my hang up or my heartbreak ended up being the very thing that pushed me to becoming maybe an instrument of hope for anyone who may have experienced what I experienced. Instead of moving away from what gave me discomfort, I was pulled right into it. And it was there that I embraced the opportunity to learn and grow, and with the openness to say, okay, this may be used sometime later in life. And I never would have imagined that now in this place in my life, even though I may not be an elected official, but to engage the political process in a way that I didn't know, God is good.
So I'm going to repeat what you said because somebody probably just missed that.
Okay.
So let me give it back to them. the one thing that you could be going through in your life that may be instilling heartache could also be the one thing that then becomes make you an instrument of hope.
Yes. That's right.
Did y'all hear that? Did y'all just hear what Dr. Wilder said? Wow. All right, here we go, people. It's on now. We're ready. Now, I got one more question, and we're gonna move on to something else.
Okay.
When did you get the voice? When did you get that voice? When did you get? I always want to know, when do the preachers get the voice? When does it happen? Do you get it at 15? Does it happen at 21? Like, when did you get your voice?
Yeah. So I was 22 when I accepted my call. But that voice took quite some time. I think that probably maybe middle to the end of my seminary journey, it was when my voice developed.
Wow.
Yeah. So while there was an acknowledgement and acceptance of the call, the voice took years to mature. Yeah.
You got to get the call first, then you get the chords. That's what you're telling me.
Right.
You got to go from the call to the chords. Because people, if you didn't know he was a preacher, if you talk to him, you'd be like, he's a preacher. Like, it is a thoughtful way of speaking, very patiently, but it's almost as if you're waiting to receive the message first before it comes out of your mouth.
Right.
So it's not coming out of you, it's coming through you. That's kind of how I feel when I talk to pastors.
Yeah. Yeah. A mentor of mine once said is you have to have Jesus in your head as you do in your heart.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. We've seen a lot, especially in my church experience. I've seen a lot of leaders go back and get higher degrees, more advanced degrees. And I'm seeing that more in Black churches. Do you see that as something that's important, that those who are called to the ministry also need to seek higher education?
Yes, very much so. A good bit of it is depends on your denomination. If you're in the Methodist tradition, United Methodist or AME, absolutely. Seminary is required to be ordained. In the Baptist church, it depends on the church. May even depend on the association. If you are serving as an associate for a large influential congregation, and you know that congregation has full of educated people, best believe that seminary education is a requirement.
Yeah.
As opposed to maybe a rural area, maybe not so much. There may be classes that pastors could take that could help, sharpen them intellectually while getting nurtured spiritually. But seminary education is important. Seminary education and even graduate school are becoming more important now. Definitely because I had a conversation a while ago with a colleague of mine who was at Morehouse School of Religion in Atlanta in an administrative role. And he shared that pastors who return and pursue doctorates, whether it's a PhD or D-Min, or actually who have the D-Min and end up going back and getting a PhD, a number of them decide that they don't want the pastorate to be the end all.
Yeah.
That they want to teach in the academy as well. There's some pastors who say, I want to just serve at a church for 25 years and then move on to the academy. Some say, well, I want to do both because I feel led that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And being that bridge and the tension that exists between the two institutions. I didn't see that for me until probably when I was in graduate school, but was influenced enough by seminary professors of mine who did both and saw it could happen. Yeah. One of my professors who just died over a week ago was one who pastored and was a professor. So he was a model for me, Dr. Love Henry Welcher Jr. He was a model for me to know we can put one foot in the church and the academy. And with God's help, we can still spread the message of hope that's needed in both institutions. Wow. So yeah, I think that one, because they're pastors who want to teach, and also because of the fact that, and then this is a reality too, that there are pastors who desire an additional stream of income as well. And so to do both, and so to not just rely solely on a church salary, but to also be available to serve in other avenues, particularly in the academy. So those are some of the reasons why I've seen and why certain pastors would return and pursue advanced degrees for those reasons. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry to hear about your loss.
Thank you.
I want to ask you this. In this newer generation, I hear a lot of younger people, when we talk about churches, they say, well, I don't go to church. I'm not very religious, but I am spiritual. Mm. What is the difference between being spiritual and being religious?
Mm-hmm.
And
that's a great
understanding.
Yeah, that's a great question, because that was something my classes discussed today. And so the difference between religion and spirituality: religion is a set of institutional beliefs that govern a certain community of faith. Spirituality is the journey in which we're traveling. We may be connected to a faith tradition, a faith community, where we are in fellowship with one another and are growing and maturing in the faith. Spirituality is the journey that seeks something deeper than just a religion. And that deeper meaning can be a purpose. A deeper meaning can be greater understanding. Spirituality means more than just where do I go to church and what is my faith tradition. But
I'm going to ask you this. I know what you're going to say, but I'm going to ask for the people that are listening and watching. Why is it that you think some people don't want to be connected to a religion?
Yeah, I think it's a variety of things. I think some may have had unfortunate experiences in a religious institute, in a church, and have decided that church is not for me. When I go to church, I may experience shame and dishonor, and that's not where I feel most comfortable. So I'm going to just decide that it's just going to be me, myself, and I in this spiritual journey. That's one reason. Two, it can also be because a number of young people don't see church as relevant as much anymore. I wrote an article along with my co-author that came out earlier this year, wrestling with the tension and the opportunities between Black Lives Matter and the Black church. Dr. Leah Gunning Francis, who is a professor, wrote a book called, and I don't want to misquote her book, but she wrote a book years ago that when she was at Eden Theological Seminary in St. Louis, she wrote a book in response to what was happening. Ferguson and Faith. And so her book, of course, shared some of the stories that younger people who were involved in Black Lives Matter had with the church, and some of the things that some of the clergy experienced with Black Lives Matter activists. And what they learned, and from what some of the stories revealed, was the traditional understanding of hierarchical leadership is not popular among young activists. That younger activists tend to gravitate to Ella Baker's group-centered leadership model, as opposed to top-down leadership model that Dr. King and the Black church tradition followed. And so because the younger people saw that each of them are an empowered part, and I think the comparison was, and I think the metaphor of a group-centered leadership reminded you of, I believe, a spider, I believe it was. Each leg has a part to play toward the body. And so then, as opposed to what happens if the head is cut off, well, everyone has a part to play to keep the head going.
Yeah.
Instead of just an erect figure and you cut off the head and the body doesn't survive.
Yeah.
So I think it's because definitely the church's relevance, and of course what one may have experienced in church that has decided for one, church is not for me.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I think about when I think about churches is when I started teaching, we focused a lot on literacy. And in order to make literacy or the text relevant, we always talked about that text to self connection. And I think
Yeah.
part of the problem we have now in some churches is people don't see that church to self connection. They don't see themselves in churches, or they don't see themselves represented or respected by churches. And that causes a disconnect. The other thing that I think is that word that you used earlier, which is religions govern. And we see a lot of these young people don't want to be governed. They want to be free, independent people to do and move about this earth as they want to, always on this spiritual journey. But my only concern is who's leading the journey.
Yeah. Yeah, because you have to have a facilitator.
Exactly.
The way I conduct my classes, yes, I'm the professor. At the same time, it is also, I also encourage students providing leadership in our space. It's a student-centered classroom. And the same way I conduct my classes would be the same way I would hope that our churches would do. We need somebody, we need that guide, we need that facilitator, we need that under shepherd, who we hope is inspired by God to ensure that each of us are moved toward our greatest potential and highest good.
Yeah.
We need that. Mm-hmm.
Now, I know we talked a little bit, you just touched on a little bit of Martin Luther King, and I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper into his work, since I know that you have some expertise in that area. What do you think is the most underrated thought that surrounds Dr. King's work?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's an excellent question. As I reflect on it briefly, I think that, and I think about what unfortunately happens on the weekend of the third Monday in January. The media always shows us, I have a dream.
Yeah. And
one of my colleagues here, who was a history professor here, had shown me a cartoon and how white people see Dr. King. That Dr. King was sleeping one night and, he woke up, I have a dream that one day my 4 children will be judged by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin, and not play the race card.
Yeah.
And that inscription was on his tombstone. So I would say that Dr. King that the speech, while I have a dream, is important, and especially beyond the clip that we see, because there's some things that he says in the speech that we don't get to hear in the public eye. And I encourage us to read that. But I think that what's underrated about King was the fact that I think if I had to choose a speech, for example, I think what would be his time to break silence speech, and when he protested the war in Vietnam.
Yeah.
The date that he gave that speech, April 4th, 1967, exactly 1 year he was killed, April 4th, 1968. Mm. It was after he gave the speech at the Riverside Church in New York where his popularity sunk. He lost friends, he lost allies, definitely an ally in President Lyndon Johnson. Yeah. He sunk into depression enough that he was ready to leave the world because there was nothing else left for him. His marriage was also challenged as well. And of course, when J. Edgar Hoover was FBI director, of course, he had it in for King. Okay, you need to just go ahead and kill yourself. So King sunk into a depression. Even his friendship with Jackie Robinson, that came to an end because of his speech. And so Dr. Welcher once said that King's assassination was his salvation because of all that he carried with him and the depression that he experienced after he gave the speech at Riverside Church and then the time of his death. So I would say to me, and there's a lot we could say, but I would say the most underrated understanding of Dr. King was definitely he was someone who was bigger than this speech. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then it revealed his humanity,
Because I like what you're saying. For some white people, it's easier to digest as a very humble being who was not trying to cause discord in the country.
Right.
Um, but when he made it very apparent what his true vision was,
right,
then people became very upset with him.
yes, because they thought that you're right, because people thinking, well, he's just a civil rights leader. Well, no, he's a pastor first.
Yeah.
Who grew up in the Black church tradition, which is not just a priestly tradition, where it's concerned about the very members, but it is also prophetic, where it speaks truth to power. And so King came through that tradition, and of course, that speech he made definitely was an example of him speaking from that Black church tradition. Well, he's a civil rights leader. He shouldn't be talking about political affairs. He shouldn't be, he shouldn't be getting in America's business. Well, that's exactly what he was called to do.
Yeah. Very strategic. I think people don't think how strategic he was. He was a man of a plan. And that was the appointed time to reveal that part of his plan. But I think he knew God had given him the vision that he had to get so many things done first before he released that.
Right.
Yeah. I agree. Let's talk a little bit about this. So in this journey you have been on in your life, who has had the greatest impact on you in your career?
Well, I definitely say my parents, because my parents definitely instilled the importance of an education. That was something that was true with my brother and me. My brother was the first who actually went to graduate school before I did. I mean, we went to grade school, college. We didn't know we were going to go to seminary together. I received my calling before he did. So I think he received his maybe about 2 years after I did. So I finished seminary about a year earlier than he did, but he decided to pursue his doctorate before I did. And so he inspired me to pursue graduate study. But I would say my parents provide the educational foundation. That education was important, knowledge, and definitely knowledge and faith, because of course, to do both, to have both, to me, you can't just have all this knowledge and not have a faith to discern and guide how to best use it.
Yeah.
So definitely my parents. I mentioned Dr. Love Henry Welchel, my seminary professor who passed away. Because of course he shared with me, he demonstrated a model to be a pastor and a professor. Another mentor of mine, the late Dr. Echo Nix Jr., he was definitely one who served in, we knew each other for a long time. And so to do community to engage the community, to serve in a church, and to also pursue a doctorate and do scholarship. He was definitely one who was inspirational to me. He was like a big brother, mentor figure of mine. And so I miss him now because we were going to write a book together when I finished my dissertation. He was on my committee. So he said, okay, I got a book idea. I said, well, let's write it. But when you finish your work.
Yeah.
And so, so those are my mentors. And then definitely acknowledge a variety of seminary professors and friends who have grown in the faith and who are either in the academy or in the church. My dad was the first pastor I remember who welcomed women into the pulpit. That made a significant impact on the fact that God can choose whoever God chooses to call. Yeah.
I'm sure that wasn't a popular decision for some people in the church.
No, it wasn't. No. And for some, and churches, unfortunately now, it still isn't. Even being in 2021.
So let's imagine we've got some people sitting here watching you. You know, of course, with BDM, we do have people who are in search or seeking their doctoral degree, but we also have people that watch, you know, just across social media. And there's somebody who's watching you and they're saying, I really admire him and I would love to do the work that he's doing in academia and also in leading a congregation. What advice would you give them?
No, that's what you're called to do, first of all. I'll speak first on the academic side. I learned that reason why I didn't pursue my PhD right after seminary was because I wasn't sure what I wanted to pursue in a doctoral program. I knew I wanted to do a PhD. That was determined while I was in seminary, but in what, I wasn't sure. So I say that to say, because it requires a lot of your time and financial efforts, please make sure when you pursue a doctorate, don't just do it because it looks good behind your name.
Yeah.
But do it because you're passionate and you're led to do it because you sense that you can make an impact.
Say that one more time. One more time.
I would say to not go after a PhD or some type of doctorate just to have a title behind your name. Do it because you are passionate and you feel led to do something that will make a meaningful impact in the world around you.
It's not about the name, people. It's not about the name. It's about the difference you're going to make.
Right. Because
what's a name with no power?
Exactly. And I believe in much is given, much is required.
Yeah.
So for somebody to have a PhD, I share with my students often, I said, I have a huge responsibility to ensure that what they receive will help them in what they're doing in the world, because I have a lot of, I've had and still have some first generation students, and they have parents, siblings, people in their community, their village, who are going to be looking to them as models. And so it is important that in whatever we do, especially if we're going to pursue a PhD or a doctorate, make sure you're clear as to the passion that you're going to pursue.
Yeah.
As far as doing both and the church, I would say the same thing. Because one of the things I find is not every church can support a pastor who does both.
Yeah.
And so that requires prayer and discernment and time. I mean, I'm thankful for the church I serve now that allows me to do what I do, because then it pours into them what they need to help them be empowered in their work as well. Yeah.
He's dropping nuggets, people. I mean, these are free. We're not even charging y'all for these things. So just pick them up and put them in your pocket. That's all I can tell you. So you wear a lot of hats, right? You're professor, writer, speaker, pastor, husband, father. How do you take care of Dr. Wilder?
Great question. I have a 55-minute drive from my home to Newberry College. I spend a lot of quiet time with God, and that's very important to me. I used to have that before the kids. There were times I had it, but they're up early in the morning, so I don't get that time. The only time I get is in the morning, just say, thank you, Lord. And then when I drop them off to daycare, and then when I go on the road, that's where I can just turn off the music, just be at one with God. So whatever comes in that moment, I'm thankful for that opportunity to be vulnerable. So having quiet time is important. I exercise. I learned that one of the benefits that our institution offers at a discounted rate is to join the local gym. So I strive to go there once a week, but then but the gym where I go when I'm at home, I strive to go there at least twice a week. So exercise is important to me. Learning how to eat well, that's been a journey as well. Paying attention particularly to foods that will enhance my energy, will help with my memory, and also foods that will definitely, hopefully, enhance the quality of my life. So being mindful of my food choices are important. I cheat every once in a while, sure.
That's okay. No judgment here.
Right. But outside of that, exercise, eating well, time for prayer, quiet time, meditation. Then, of course, I get family time. So when I come home, the boys are eating dinner. My wife cooks the dinner. So we're catching up on each other's day. We're playing with the boys. They eventually go to bed soon. They have an early bedtime. And then my wife and I have time to spend with each other. So it had to be intentional from the beginning, what mattered the most. And so that's something that I had to make up in my mind. I think when I moved back to Greenville after I finished seminary and my day started at 6 o'clock every morning, that's when I had to learn, okay, it's time to ensure that you put to work time management, self-care.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I can't forget to share this, and I share this with my congregation: time away, vacation time.
Yeah. Very.
Yeah. Yeah, because one, I had not experienced a pandemic before, and definitely not being able, not definitely preaching every Sunday during a pandemic, where we couldn't have other pastors and ministers to come and preach when I'm not there. So now that's something I do, and I'm glad to do it during a pandemic, because I knew there were moments where I was tired and I just couldn't give of myself anymore, and I needed to refresh and retreat. So yes, knowing when to rest. And I remember what was told to me before about that was, if people don't do it, if you don't do that for yourself, don't expect people to do that for you. Yeah. You need to know when you need to step away.
Yeah, make yourself a priority, people.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what's next for you? I mean, we have a lot going on. So where do you see yourself, in the near future?
Yeah. Well, definitely to be tenured. That's important. To be a tenured professor, absolutely. Continuing to do both, continuing to engage the church and the academy. Now, what that looks like, whether that means staying where I am, only God can say. But definitely being faithful to both. One of the things for which I'm thankful in my current position is, while scholarship is important, that's not the major. Publishing is not going to publishing enough is not going to perish my academic career where I am. Awesome. So I still want to continue my scholarship, continue to serve, and continue to educate and empower generations of students, allow them to empower me in what I do. Definitely, I would like one day to hopefully serve in some type of think tank, whether it's to influence policy in some way, because there's still that part of me that still wants to be in some type of position to influence policy. Yeah. So yeah, what that looks like, I'm not sure yet, but I know years ago that was one of my goals, to eventually serve in that position. Now, would I serve in my church for 20, 25 years? Again, only God can lead me to doing that, but to still impact those, the academy and the church, to impact the greater world in which we live. Yeah. I'm definitely thankful. I tell people we can pursue careers that can definitely pay us very well. At the same time, though, that may not exactly allow us to work in our passion. Yeah. And so I'm thankful to be in a position to do both. Again, I never would have thought that God would place me where I am, because when God called me, I said yes, but I did not know how that would live out. And so to be in this place now, I'm definitely thankful. I would just want to continue to nurture myself and them and make a meaningful impact. Wow.
Well, it's individuals like you that we are so thankful that we have connected to the Black Talk Doctoral Network. Your work, your energy, your passion, your commitment are all the things we value in our members. You bring so much, not just to the community, but also to the work that we believe in. How do you hope that your relationship with the Black Doctoral Network will enhance your career?
Yes, definitely. I joined the Black Doctoral Network when I was a doctoral learner. And one of the valuable opportunities I've had was to present my dissertation when it was in its early stages, and to receive meaningful feedback as a result. That is valuable. So I say definitely to take advantage of every opportunity that Black Doctor Network has to offer. Workshops, meeting people who are already doing what we aspire to do, and seek mentoring relationships. That's important. Also, I mean, one workshop I remember learning very well was the difference between being an adjunct and being a tenure track, and there was a reference to being a field slave and a house slave. That was an impactful, that painted a picture of where we are. At the same time, though, what it did was it still provided a space for us to engage challenges and opportunities that we may experience or have experienced, and learn from those stories and become empowered. Yeah. So how Black Doctor Network will help enhance my career, it will do so by keeping me connected and keeping me humble. Because now I'm in a place where I have to give back. I have to pour back because somebody did that for me. Yeah. And that's what Black Doctor Network will allow me to do. And I'm definitely thankful to be a part of this wonderful organization.
Wow. Well, again, we are thankful to have you to be a part of us. It has truly been a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this interview for the last 4 to 8 hours. So I'm glad we had a chance to do this. I have watched some of your sermons, so I've researched you. And
wow. Okay.
to talk to you. Would you please tell our viewers and listeners where they can go to learn more about you and the work that you do?
Sure. I invite you to check out my website at www.leronewilder.com. That's a place where you get to know a bit about me and some of the works that I've produced, and a way you can also contact me. You can also send me an email at Lerone, LERONE.Wilder, WILDER, at newberry.edu. You can also contact me there. And to get to know me, there is a faculty page on Newberry College's website, sharing what I've done in my career. So you can contact me through my Newberry College email, or definitely through my website. I do have a Twitter account. So my Twitter handle is at Lerone Wilder. So you can definitely contact me through Twitter as well. And I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me there as well.
So listen, people, go and follow him, check him out, get connected with him if you need him. I mean, if you want to go to Newberry and be one of his students, there you go. You know, we want to go ahead and drive up to Greenville, South Carolina. Just whatever you need to do, connect with Dr. Wilder. I promise you, the man will change your life. And then while you're doing all of that, stay connected to the Black Doctoral Network as well. Follow us on all of our social media channels. Thank you for joining us today. This has been a pleasurable, if nothing else, conversation with Dr. Lerone Wilder. We hope you will join us again next time. But for now, please like, share, subscribe, and don't forget to tell a friend. Until next time, guys, you guys be blessed.